Don't you hate that sloppy wet sound of messy eating? The ripping and tearing of flesh being torn straight from the bone. Now imagine hearing that sound in the middle of the night coming from your attic. Well, I've got a story today about just that, and 4 more with it. Today I have 5 allegedly true scary stories about creepy sounds, disturbing followers, and Christmas critters of all things. Enjoy, and don't forget to send us your story at darkstories.org. Let's begin. It Chews in My Attic, from Redwood Spooks. Last October, around the 21st, I purchased my first place. Not a simple apartment like most people would expect. I saved up for a house and managed to get one for extremely cheap, but I made the mistake of just buying it after seeing some pictures. I guess the deal was that good. I know people might be thinking, what kind of person buys a house that cheap without even visiting it? Well, I'll tell you this. When I see something I really want, I go for it. Anyway, when I arrived at the house for the first time, the previous owners left most of their furniture. It made moving in a lot easier. It also seemed as if all the appliances in the house were brand new. This struck me as strange. Why would they leave behind new appliances? I didn't worry too much, because who doesn't like free stuff? I was low on cash anyway after the purchase. The first day was exhausting, moving things in. Eventually, I made it to my new room to set it up. It was a nice-sized room, enough to fit my computer setup, my bed, my TV, and my wardrobe for clothes. It took me a couple of hours to set up the place. By the time I was done, it was 3 a.m. I was exhausted and ready to just collapse into bed. Throughout the night, I heard scratching above me, and I thought I even heard breathing. I managed to explain this away, thinking it was just the sounds of a house I wasn't used to. Every old house has its own unique vibe and set of sounds, I guess. The next morning, as I was curious about the history of the place, I hopped on my desktop and researched what I could about the previous owners. I actually knew beforehand that someone had disappeared who owned this house before me. Those circumstances were quite suspicious. But I was a thrill seeker, and this actually pushed me more to want to buy the house. Unfortunately, my research didn't turn up more than I already knew. So I decided to explore the house a bit further. I needed to know what was in that attic. I searched all over the place for a way to get up there. And as if my life was some sort of real horror movie, it turned out that the entrance was in the corner of my bedroom. It was a trapdoor type entrance where you pull the string and the stairs fell down. I took my phone and turned on the flash, deciding to take a look around up there. It was incredibly dark and dank, hard to breathe. There was a stench to the place that made me want to vomit. It was like an animal had died up there. I couldn't see much, but I could hear something moving around. As I believe anyone would, I called out to make myself known. "Hey, is there anyone up here?" There was no response. I assumed that I was alone in the attic, so I made my way down after not hearing any further noises. But before I hit the last step, something definitely moved behind me. A sound that could not be explained away by a settling house or wind. I quickly turned around in fear, but it turned out to be a couple of little mice walking around behind me. This caused me to go out and buy some mouse traps so that they could be taken care of. I didn't want their scratching to bother me anymore. And if you're wondering, I didn't buy those traps that hurt them. I'm more of a catch and release kind of guy. The traps cost me about $50, but it would be worth it. I set them up right when I got back home. To cool off and relax, I played some League of Legends with a friend of mine named Grilby for the rest of the day and a little bit into the night. Our dream was to become pro, but that dream stopped, so we just played against some bots. But something strange happened while we were playing. I ended up hearing squeaking in the attic, so I told my friend I had to go check it out. He laughed and told me he hopes Cho'Gath eats me up there. I kindly told him to shove it and went up to check what was going on, expecting more mice, but I wanted to be sure. When I went to pull down the attic door, it felt a bit weird, as if something was pulling on it from the other side. Eventually, I tugged it and got it open. I walked up, not bringing a light this time, because my phone had died, and that's what I used as my flashlight before. I looked in the trap I bought, and it seemed to be broken. I guess the mice had broke out of it. Crap, I said. I began to climb back down from the attic, but as I did, I noticed a reflection from the corner of the attic. Eyes. I gasped and rubbed my eyes and looked back, but the eyes were gone, and I assumed, or maybe hoped, that I was just seeing things. That night went smoothly after that, save for me and my friend getting whooped by the bots. Like I said, we were far from pro. After the game, we decided to sit around and video chat, chilling for a bit. We eventually came to the topic of scary stories of all things. After an hour of this, I was getting sleepy. I said goodbye and headed off to bed. I put on some philosophy chill step videos to help me sleep, with the volume down a bit low, and I began to drift off. But I was brought back to life by a sudden and loud bang. I quickly turned on the light and put on my glasses. The downside about having a lamp right next to the bed means that it doesn't fill the whole room, and there are patches of darkness throughout. But from what I could tell, everything seemed normal at first. That was until I looked at the corner to where the attic was, and I saw that the stairs of the attic had been pulled down from the other side. I didn't even know they could do that. Worse yet, there was someone standing near the stairs. Not someone, something. A pale white figure with long arms and legs, crouching, chewing on something. I turned on my phone's light and pointed it at the creature. It turned around and it was holding something up to its face. Crunch. I realized it was eating one of the mice from the attic. I sprang up, grabbing my knife and screaming. In a matter of seconds, the creature jumped on me and bit my right shoulder. But as it bit down, I lodged my knife into its neck. The creature gurgled and growled before it scurried off into the attic with a sickening crawling sound. I quickly closed the attic door, then called 911. I was rushed to the hospital as I was bleeding pretty bad. I spoke to the police and asked them if they found anything in my attic. One of the officers took his hat off, explaining to me they found a nest-type thing in the attic, one that consisted of dead mice and what the police believe to be human bones. And due to the vanishing of one of the previous owners, they believe it could be his, but they would have to test the remains. They recommended I stay away from that house, stay with a friend for a while, until the place was cleaned up. I thanked them for their help and stayed with one of my cousins. I'm finally home now and I'm writing this. I sealed off the attic and everything has been fine since. I'm thankful I didn't stay asleep when hearing the attic stairs open. Otherwise, this house would have had another vanishing owner. The Abandoned Saloon, from Rosethorn. North of Calgary, along Highway 1 in the middle of the city, there is a hotel that we were instructed to go to learn how to properly investigate a presumably haunted place. This was part of a ghost hunting course I was taking, and it was one of my most important classes. We had to know how to investigate a haunted property thoroughly, safely, and most importantly, with the property owner's permission and concerns. A lot of the places we investigate are because of sightings and unexplained events that guests or homeowners experience, and it's always so surprising how common this actually is. This hotel was no different. It was one of the more famous spots that my group had researched frequently. Once myself and my group had arrived, we were given introductions and attendance was taken, and it wasn't long until we were led down the hall of this hotel to the storage room, or what I know now as the abandoned saloon. As the name states, it used to be an extremely popular saloon in Calgary, with the stereotypical Western music, drinks, and style. It sounded like a pretty fun place. But the second I entered the room, every hair on my body stood on end. This heavy, wrong feeling overtook me. I'm not sure how to explain it, other than that feeling you get when you're being watched. This felt like whatever pressure was in that room was overwhelming me, crushing me, making me want to puke the more I stood in that room. I decided to swallow down the pain and ignore it for the moment, while my instructor explained the history of the building itself. But as she explained this, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this shadow from behind the counter of the bar, slowly moving up the wall like a figure was standing up to its full height after crouching down. The shadow itself loomed over the counter, just watching us. His head didn't move, but I could feel this shadow watching me. I grabbed my camera to try to snap a photo, but the shadow had already faded into the wall and disappeared. Admittedly, I was disappointed that I could not take a photo of it. I honestly wish I was fast enough, but unfortunately I was unlucky, as the rest of the investigation went awfully quietly. Well, other than myself feeling more and more ill as the night went on. There were cases, however, where the younger ladies, the same age as myself, were being touched by an unseen force on the hips and legs and even shoulders. Mind you, this didn't happen to me. I honestly felt like I was being squeezed by this force more than touched, but it is one thing I cannot prove. In fact, it is a rule that we must not report any kinds of touching unless it was a force of damage, like a bruise, gash, or scratch. That way we'd have something tangible to show as proof. Other small things happened that night. We heard shuffling and movement in the dark when my group was just sitting down and trying to watch the counter for activity. There were even objects that moved around forcibly on their own, as if an invisible force was shoving things around. Something wanted to scare us away and did not like us here, but my feelings of being squeezed intensified as soon as we entered the freezer behind the counter. The nausea and horribly negative pressure was beginning to get to me. I was even beginning to feel faint, so I had someone else hold my recorder for me. After my instructor noticed this, she finally told us something terrible that happened with one of the last girls that was there with her while investigating the place. From what I was told, she was grabbed by the throat and shoved into the wall. Apparently, this was what happened to some of the female workers that worked here at the saloon by their manager, forced into silence after the unspeakable he did to them. A real freak. Apparently, the manager had disappeared after one of the girls squealed to some big bikers who had attempted to drag him out of the building. I can't completely confirm that tale, but one thing was for sure. Whatever was there was incredibly evil and violent. I left that saloon, never planning to go back after that. I'd never felt such evil, and I wonder if whatever this thing is, it was trying to do something terrible to me. I wasn't planning to tell this story, but a few months ago, when I graduated from the course, I learned that the saloon was no longer available for investigations. You want to know why? They're reopening it. I couldn't even express my disappointment. I had to swallow my fear down, my anger. I warn you of this. If you decide to stay in Calgary, be careful of where you stay, especially the saloon, because it holds a dark presence. Have you heard of Project Blue Book? From BlueBookFarm. In 1948, a UFO was spotted by a farmer in Gurley, Alabama. This story was passed around when I was in grade school. I grew up in Gurley and recently moved back to attend college in Huntsville. It is a commute for classes, but it's worth it. I live here with my husband, 6 dogs, and a cat. We live on what used to be farmland. The old farmhouse stood across from us until this February. It was the farmhouse that we had told stories about and camped near to watch the skies. It was sad to see this piece of local lore dismantled. The destruction was sudden and strange. Usually, when a building is destroyed, the rubble is either burned or taken to a dump. But this is not what happened. A huge pit was dug next to the house. Then the house was toppled into the pit. They filled the pit with concrete, and the final step was to cover the concrete with dirt. Nothing was moved away. You could still see the knickknacks balanced on the windowsills as the house was dragged and pushed into the pit. Why go through all of this to destroy a dilapidated old house? I've got no idea. Maybe there's a logical reason behind it, but there's no one to ask. In 2019, February to be precise, the show Project Blue Book aired an episode called Operation Paperclip, in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from Germany to America to work for the US government. This happened between 1945 and 1959, and that happens to be the same time that a UFO was spotted in Gurley, Alabama, which led to the demolishment of the farmhouse, as well as the aforementioned and strange pit. The pit was dug after only a few days of non-stop work. By the weekend, the house was gone. And during that time as well, there was a rash of strange sightings of lights in the sky, of strange objects that were low to the ground, yet silent to human ears. The people knew they definitely weren't planes. Now, calling the objects light was not accurate of me. Light radiates outward and illuminates the surrounding area, while these objects were visible in the darkness and appeared to radiate without any illumination. It's hard to explain. They appeared to be constructed of light, while at the same time they did not cast any. I'm sorry if this is difficult to understand. It's like trying to describe a color to someone who is blind. And to this day, I still see things living here out in Alabama. My most terrifying experience here was one night when I was outside taking out the garbage. My husband had just left for work, and he forgot to take the trash out like I asked him to. While I was outside, I saw the lights, and the next thing I knew, my husband was shaking me. He had gotten home from work already, because I'd been standing out in the driveway holding a garbage bag for 6 hours straight. I wasn't even sore or tired, but I did need to blow my nose, and when I did, blood came out. I was taken to the hospital, but I was practically fine. My sinuses were just really dry. These days, at night or early in the morning, I stay inside. And now, when I see the lights, they scare me. Santa's Little Helper from BleakMountain. It was Christmas Eve, back when I still believed in Santa Claus, a long time ago. Those were simpler times. I was scared of almost everything back then. I always imagined monsters coming to get me, even if I just went to use the restroom. That being said, I could still tell what was real and what was fake. As a little kid, I slept in the same room as my sister. We slept side by side, but I was a little kid, so it never felt awkward to me. This Christmas Eve, however, felt so special to me, because I thought I had proof of the mythical Santa Claus actually existing. It started when my sister and I were arguing like we always did. I can't remember over what. That's when we heard a loud thump coming from the living room. Now, my sister was a lot older than me, and she had already grew out of the whole believing Santa thing at the time of this occurrence. Of course, my sister plus my other sister, who slept in a different room than us, never said to me Santa wasn't real. They thought it was cute how I believed in him, and so did my parents, so they humored me. In addition, I thought the thump came from jolly old Saint Nick himself coming down the chimney. I'm sure looking back at it now that it was most likely just my parents putting the presents underneath the Christmas tree. At the time, I was thinking it was Santa, and my sister lyingly agreed with me. Both of us stopped arguing at that very moment, and she went to go to sleep while I pretended to, covering my head underneath the covers as I always did. But then, after a while of tossing and turning and struggling to keep my eyes closed, I heard someone speaking. They were talking in an unknown language, and what scared me was that the sound was coming from right beside my bed. The closest way I can think to describe it is to just type a bunch of random letters together, or to compare it to the way kids will lie and say they can speak another language, then start talking meaningless gibberish. Plus, the voice of this creature sounded not like a little kid, but a smaller, dwarf-sized thing. I could not tell its age by its voice, though. Again, I was a silly kid, so I thought, if anything, it was one of Santa's elves coming to see if my sister and I were still awake. I was afraid to take the covers off my head and look for myself, so I didn't do that, and the sound soon went away. The next morning, I was so excited to tell everyone about my encounter with Santa and his elf. Everyone faked that they believed me. It's only now as an adult that I look back on this encounter and realize how freaking creepy it was. Did my sister not hear that strange voice? Was she asleep? And if she did hear, maybe she was too freaked out to move as well. I'm too old to think that Santa and his elves are real, of course. But I was also old enough to realize that there was something in the room with me that night. And what it could be, I have no idea. It follows from Mike. I'm a 46-year-old guy from Africa, currently residing in Los Angeles. Growing up, I was a big believer in cursed items and their devastating effects on people's lives, prosperity, and health. It's no secret in Africa, so I've always been aware of it, but never once believed that it would happen to me. In 2012, I had the privilege of managing some apartment complexes for my friend for extra money, and in the process got acquainted with another African from Cameroon. We clicked, and he proposed renovating the floor of one of the rooms. A deal was struck and work started, and it was completed successfully. He then offered to rent the room and hall for after-party gigs, which I accepted. After 3 months of non-payment, though, I grew frustrated, and I was forced to evict him. On making rounds in the building, I noticed that he had turned the room into a living spot for himself. I later gathered that he had been homeless for a long time. The eviction continued for quite a while, though, and after successfully reclaiming the keys back, I noticed that his belongings were still abandoned in that room. I called over and over, leaving messages for him to come pick up his property, but he never got back to me. So it was up to me what to do with them. As I was removing his things, I stumbled upon a multicolored abstract wall painting. I knew that it would all eventually be dropped into the trash, so I kept the picture as compensation for the trouble he brought my way. That's when it all started. From the very moment I hung that picture, my relationship of 9 years tanked. A negative energy began to hang around me in my apartment, and my ex would always go off on stupid non-issues. My new business took literally 1 month to dissolve. Soon enough, the relationship ended on a very sad note. I moved to a new apartment, met a new girl, and the same thing started all over again like some sort of demented clockwork. Since my main income was from retail commission, I began noticing very bad sale days no matter how hard I tried. Sometimes I would go 4 days without a single sale. People often retracted before I could finalize. This was bizarre. I'd been working at the same company for more than 4 years and never experienced anything like this. My second relationship struggled until we couldn't do it much longer and she moved out. I then moved out too. I got yet another apartment. Thankfully though, after a while, she and I reconnected and began working on a new relationship. One night I was sitting on the couch opposite the painting. It was then just randomly that I decided to take a closer look at the abstract painting, and I noticed that it had a drawing of the devil, complete with a pointy tail and demonic eyes. Somehow, although it was right there, it was extremely difficult to make out as it was drawn in abstract, hence why it took me so long to finally see it. Once I decoded the picture, I took it out to the porch and left it there face down and away from my home. I would always be hesitant to throw it out because it was really pretty, a bit of a conversation starter in my apartment. Sometimes when I expected guests, I'd pull it back in and hang it. I kept doing this for well over a year until I went and took it to another section of my porch, putting it face down to the floor again. All went well for some months, and then the bad luck began again. I went 7 days without a customer walking into my store at all. Another first for my career. Having understood the picture and its significance to my ups and downs, I went straight to where I left it, and I found that the building painters hired to repaint the apartment had moved the picture back up and facing my apartment once again. The timing was beyond coincidence at this point. That was it for me. I waited until nightfall and took it to the dumpster. Before I did, I wanted to write "Do not take brings bad luck" on it, but I didn't have a marker, and I couldn't break the dang thing into pieces because it was just too big and durable. So I discarded it outside the dumpster room. Since then, it's been good sailing in my relationship and in my work. I just made 2 months of straight sales. Since then, I've assumed that the guy I evicted a long time ago, he may have been broke and homeless because of that picture. I pray that whoever picks it up next doesn't hang it inside the house. Did you like today's stories? Let me know in the comments which story you liked the most, or which one you didn't like. And of course, I'd love to know what kinds of stories you want to hear next. Till then, good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have your own story, share it with us at darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, check the links in the description. As usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous episode, titled, "It Only Looked Like My Girlfriend. 5 Creepy True Stories." Twilight Princess says, "I would be interested to hear some stories from people who deal with psych patients. I used to work in a hospital, and we had some odd characters to say the least." That would be a really awesome video, to be honest. So if anyone has a story like that, please let me know and send it to me at darkstories.org. Kev Kicks Butt at Halo says, "I've got 3 scary stories, but I don't know how to post it. I enjoy these stories at work, and I have some true ones of my own, so I'd like to share at least one." Hey Kev, to share a story with me, go to darkstories.org. There's a submit button on the first page. If you don't want to make an account, you can just submit it anonymously. If you do want to make an account, you can keep track of your stories you post and participate in an awesome community. Vegan Jinx says, no thank you. If you're talking about the video, I'm not sure why you'd leave an early comment like this if you didn't want to watch it. But okay. Craven the One says, Apple. Oh, Craven. Something tells me you don't have to see a lot of doctors. And Finn Bauer says, that skinwalker took my girlfriend. Ouch, man. Sucks to be you. Well, he could have made the best out of the situation and got in on the weirdest three-way you've ever heard of. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.